We are finally getting some good news on the injury front as speedster Brenen Thompson was back at practice on Tuesday, which is great news for the Chargers offense.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier. And there's going to be a lot that's going down over these next few days as the roster cuts happen, but it does seem like Bud Dupree, unlikely and maybe unfortunately, is going to be locking up his 53-man roster spot because nobody was able to take his job. So we have to talk about that, but also talk about Keaton Mitchell having a setback and the Chargers missing that explosive piece of their rushing attack that's already been struggling. But the best news is that Brenen Thompson, the 4th round pick from Mississippi State, was back on the practice field in the final day of Chargers training camp, meaning that we don't have to wait until the first, injury report comes out to know if Brenen Thompson is going to be back into the lineup or not, because now he should have plenty of time to ramp his way back up to week 1, which is great news. I mean, Brenen Thompson, you drafted him for a reason, David, and just to see, even though it wasn't in a full capacity, him back on the practice field and starting to get back towards getting back on the field, I think was actually really huge news that came out Tuesday.
It really is. It's great news because Brenen Thompson brings something to the Chargers offense that they just don't have, and that's just the true unbridled 4.26 speed. And it's just not just about what he does, what he's able to do stretching the field. It's what it opens up for everyone else on the offense. It's just something that you have to pay attention to. You have to make sure that you don't let this guy get behind you, and that threat of having to put a real coverage player on that, on Brenen Thompson is going to change how you're able to call your defense. So him being out there, being back on the field is going to be so good for the Chargers offense. And also, I think, no disrespect to Trey Lance, but Justin Herbert's a lot more accurate with the football. I think it's going to be a lot more likely that he's going to throw accurate passes and not put Brenen Thompson in harm's way where unfortunately Trey Lance put a couple of hospital balls on him and really got him hit a couple of times. And part of that is the quarterback trying to put the ball in a spot to try to protect his receivers. And Justin Herbert does a very good job of doing that. So very good news that Brenen Thompson is back on the field, even if it is in a limited capacity.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's not even like he was out there in team drills, but all this means is it's the start of him potentially being able to come back and for him to potentially have no setbacks or, nothing holding him back once the actual season starts. You should be able to get, as close to 100% of him as possible, which I think is awesome. So I don't think necessarily we're going to see him Thursday night against the Rams, but I do think this means he will be ready for week 1, which is important because of all the reasons that you said. It does change how a defense can play you back there, because if you have, one high safety and you have Brenen Thompson on the outside and they've been giving him a ton of outside reps, right? Like, it's going to be really hard for him to get there. And Trey Lance did throw him a little bit of a hospital ball in that first game for sure. Showed us the contested catch ability, which was nice. Took a hard hit over the middle. The last one wasn't really Trey Lance's fault, right? It seemed like he got injured on the deep ball where Trey Lance overthrew him and he actually ended up getting tackled before the ball even arrived there, which I think obviously, sucks because you were probably injured on a penalty. But anyways, though, then that happens in the last game. You just don't really know because he hadn't practiced at all up until Tuesday. And like during this time of the off season, not practicing for 3 practices in a row could mean you're on season-ending injured reserve, right?
Absolutely,
like if
they don't have to tell you anything.
And some of these things just don't get out, right? Like especially from the Chargers specifically. So to see him out there is great. Obviously, having someone with his skill set in particular, especially because they just seem to be finally kind of getting that connection on the long ball, him and Justin Herbert, right? Great to have him back out there with a couple weeks to, get healthy. Also keep on making that a stronger connection between him and Justin Herbert because he's had a very impressive offseason. But I do think this is also something to monitor too, just because he got hurt the last day of minicamp, right? And then we ended up seeing him out there ready for the start of training camp. But this is the second time he's been nicked up before the year. And I think for somebody of his stature as a smaller wide receiver, okay, hey, that's going to be one big part of it is showing that you can stay on the field. But as with the Chargers always, David, if there's one good piece of news information as far as the injury front, There's also bad news in that regard. And that this week is Keaton Mitchell, the Chargers kind of prized running back acquisition. The Lightning to Omarion Hampton's Thunder has not been out of practice over the last few days. It looks to me like it probably happened Saturday. I know Chris Rim did not report him not practicing on Saturday, so it seems like he was out there on Saturday and has not been back out there since. That is something I think that is a concern for sure.
It is a concern for sure because Coach McDaniel said that he had a setback. We don't know what a setback from. We don't know what the injury is, right? We have none of that information.
But you had to have something to have a setback from that thing, yeah.
Right, exactly. So there was something, and it got worse. So that's definitely not good news for the Chargers because Keaton Mitchell adds an element to the Chargers receiving game out of the backfield that they just don't have. Like, this guy is able to run like receiver quality type routes. And we saw that in the last preseason game where there was a really nice back shoulder. Yeah, it got called back, but Trey Lance hitting him on that play was a really good example of his receiving ability and how dynamic he can be in those type of situations where you might have to think twice about putting a linebacker on him, and you might want to put someone who's a little bit more of an established coverage player on him, which is just going to open things up for other players on the football field. But he is a guy that can take it the distance in the receiving game and on the ground. So hopefully it's not a long-term injury issue, because it would be really nice to have that dynamic of that Thunder and Lightning out there with Omarion Hampton, really being able to brutalize guys and really, make 3 or 4 defenders bring him to the ground, with Keaton Mitchell being able to run around you. And if he gets that just small crease, he's able to take it all the way to the house.
Yeah, he has that game-breaking speed, and obviously they have it in the wide receiver room in Brenen Thompson, but as far as out of the backfield, he does bring a specific skill set there, and that isn't the only time we've seen them run that play. It's been one of their favorites, and one of the plays we've seen several times, him getting behind a linebacker deep down the field. That we haven't seen those same kind of targets going to Omarion Hampton on what limited kind of visibility we've seen of these practices. But I think the big thing here is like having someone that can challenge a defense horizontally is such a big deal, I think, because it can also help your pass protection. And I know it seems kind of crazy to think like that, but it really does, because you can't just get straight upfield if you have someone like Keaton Mitchell that you're constantly getting to the outside with and doing little crack plays, getting the ball to him quickly. It slows down a pass rush when you have someone that can legitimately threaten the corner the way that Keaton Mitchell does. So I'm not overly concerned, because Omarion Hampton is awesome and he's a total monster, and they'll be fine because he's a bell cow back if you need him to be that. But as far as, having someone like Keaton Mitchell, they went and got him for a reason. And even though he's averaging negative yardage on his 3 carries in the preseason, he's a pivotal piece to this offense and what they want to do and how they want to make teams have to game plan for them. So I'd be very interested to hear, an update on that as soon as we get it, because right, like we said with Brenen Thompson, you just don't know this time of year because they don't really have to tell you anything until the official injury reports come out. But we still have more news, because Chris O'Leary talked about Bud Dupree, and it's never seemed more clear that he is destined to be a lock for this 53-man roster. So we're going to talk about that and a potential dark horse for the Edge 5 spot and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at season's end? On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market, and there's so many things you can make predictions on. Right now, the markets think that 82% of the market, I should say, thinks the Chargers will win their first game against the Cardinals already in week 1. That's something that's already on there, including, if the Chargers will make the playoffs or not. If they can get back to 11 or more wins, only 44% of the market thinks that. There's so many things. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. You can trade the draft pick, the game, and more. On Kalshi, download the Kalshi app and use the code LOCKDOWN to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. There are more live events than ever now worth seeing. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. And that's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple. With upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive saving opportunities that help you get to the events that you want to without the usual hassle. I mean, I know for sure I really hate surprise fees and when things just start popping up at checkout. That's one of my favorite parts about Game Time. And if you're looking to go to a Chargers game, the price of week 1 actually went down. The last time I looked, you get a $40 ticket to see Mike McDaniel and Justin Herbert in action in week 1. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Support for today's episode comes from Square. Behind so many of the local businesses people visit every day is Square, a platform designed to help businesses sell, manage, and grow. Whether it's a neighborhood coffee shop, a packed sports bar on game day, or your favorite restaurant, Square brings payments, banking, and more together in one connected system. It helps business owners spend less time managing technology and more time focusing on their customers. Square isn't just a payment processor, it's a complete business platform built to simplify the day-to-day, from accepting every major payment method to managing inventory and helping businesses access their earnings faster. Square gives owners the tools they need to run their business with confidence and take care of their patrons. So if you're starting a business or running one that deserves better tools, Square helps you sell, manage, and grow without slowing down. And right now you can get up to $200 off of Square hardware at square.com/go/LockedOnNFL. That's SQUARE.com/GO/LockedOnNFL. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. All right, David, well, there is more to get into. And, the guys that you hope make the roster aren't always the ones that end up making the team, right? And you never know how guys are going to perform. And although this next guy doesn't seem like he's had a huge training camp by any means, it does feel like after the comments from his defensive coordinator that he is a lock for this roster, which just, for Bud Dupree, is more of the same of what we've continued to hear from this coaching staff, where it seems like the words and how much they like him hasn't always matched up with the production that you're getting on the field. Right now, he is a veteran edge 4, which I don't think is the biggest deal because, last year we didn't like him going in as edge 3. Edge 4 is a little bit different. We still hoped we could see a young player maybe usurp that spot. But unfortunately, David, it does seem like at this point that Bud Dupree is destined for a roster spot.
Yeah, the daydream of us not having to watch Bud Dupree in a Chargers uniform anymore is pretty much dead here after what Chris O'Leary had to say here. He said, another dude that I get chills thinking about because he loves football, just loves the game. When he's out there, he wants to play as hard as he can. He wants the defense to play hard. He wants to run to the ball, get off blocks. He's big, he's physical. He was a first-round pick. He's a special talent. So all those things, and I just think he's been consistent, executed his job. I think he's been physical, so I don't think his career is dwindling. I think he has a lot left. That is extremely glowing commentary from Chris O'Leary, the Chargers defensive coordinator. I don't think he could have been more complimentary in the words that he chose to use when describing Bud Dupree than he did, and also just makes it abundantly clear that he probably was not ever in any jeopardy of not making this 53-man roster.
It doesn't seem like it, right? And I think it was very hopeful of us to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with hoping that young players, on cheaper contracts can go and take the spot of a veteran who's probably a little bit over the hill. And if Bud Dupree produces, I don't care at all, right?
Yeah,
I hope
great.
Bud Dupree has the best season of his career. It's nothing personal against him. I just don't think he's been nearly productive enough when they've needed him over the last couple of years. And I think this is in part because, if you watched the show earlier today about kind of the guys who didn't come through during this training camp, and Kyle Kennard being one of those guys, it just wasn't enough to overtake him, right? Having a guy like Nadeem Tucker, who has the connection with Chris O'Leary, wasn't enough to overtake him with his play, right, after a rough preseason week 2 performance. And I think having someone as edge 4 that kind of what you're going to get, even if it's not super high caliber play, he's going to kind of do what the defense asks him to do, is going to be something is going to have value for a first-time defensive coordinator in Chris O'Leary. So I understand it, but still was hoping someone young could take that spot. But right now, it doesn't look like those guys I mentioned in Kyle Kennard and non-name Tucker are even ready to take on the edge 5 spot, or could make the Chargers even consider that. What about Andre Carter II? Only signed over the last couple of weeks, but David has had some good moments where maybe he's put himself in the race.
Yeah, surprisingly, man. He's only been
Yeah.
here for a couple of weeks, but 63 snaps, 26 pass rushing snaps, 5 pressures, 4 hurries, a batted pass, and a QB hit. Like, I don't know how you can do much more in the short amount of time that you've been here to make an impression, at the very least, than what Andre Carter II has been able to do. I don't know if it's going to be enough to be able to make a 53-man roster or make them have to make a really tough decision on keeping an extra player at a position they probably weren't expecting to keep it at. But if he has another big game, he very well could put himself in position for a practice squad spot. I don't see that out of the realm of possibility at all.
Well, and the other crazy thing is, like, if Kyle Kennard and non-name Tucker are not going to be on the roster, you kind of assume they're going to try to get both those guys back on the practice squad.
Sure.
Maybe that changes with someone like Andre Carter II doing what he's done. And he's an interesting story because he probably came out of college 1 year too late. His junior year at Army, he had 20.5 tackles for loss and 16.5 sacks. And then the next year only had 3.5 sacks and 7.5 tackles for loss, and ended up, going undrafted.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, how and he does have, some NFL snaps, mostly special teams, has appeared in 15 professional games. But yeah, nothing crazy. But I mean, up until the final whistle, he's making a push. Per Chris Rim today at Chargers' last training camp practice, outside linebacker Andre Carter got into the backfield for what would have been a run stop early in practice. Carter also had a pressure where he quickly beat Travis Burke. Carter has been really impressive since arriving 2 weeks ago. Doing anything that he can, man, putting some good tape on film potentially in this final game to help him stay in the league. And it's a dude who's scratching, clawing, kind of like we saw last year with Caleb Murphy, who found a way to make the roster, right, after kind of bouncing around the league and not really finding any traction anywhere. Andre Carter, has come in and been the most, impressive of those other pass rushers outside of the top 4. So give him a ton of credit. Excited to see what he can do tomorrow night in his preseason finale as well. But we'll see if it's enough to actually make the team. Seems unlikely, but they brought him in, and he's done everything he could. And man, if he could have wrapped up a couple of those sacks and finished a couple of plays, David, we might be having a very different conversation. There was a lot of chasing the quarterback in the backfield in that last game.
Absolutely.
A little too much for my liking. Cleans that up. We could be talking about a 3 sack performance from Andre Carter, being like, oh my God, he's going to make this team. So that's how quickly things can change. But also he has, tomorrow night should get a good amount of snaps to put his best foot forward. And that's all you can ask for. But that is going to wrap things up for today's bonus episode. Make sure you're back tomorrow for the final 53-man roster prediction. Since the cutdown day is on Sunday, we have a game tomorrow night that we're going to have to talk about for Friday's show, and then we'll make any addendums to that 53-man roster prediction probably later on Friday in case anyone changes our mind during the game tomorrow night. But to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe and follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media, at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you have any surprises of who you think is going to make the roster, put it in the comments. Let us know on social media who you're thinking, because I think this is going to be the year that's probably the toughest to predict as far as who makes this final 53-man roster. So make sure you guys are back here for that tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.